Now, we're in the book of Ephesians, and we're in chapter 1. We'll be looking there in a moment. But the prayer provides a springboard for what we're going to be studying, a two-part today. We will get back to our series, but these past 2 weeks have been unusual and different. And I just have not been able to get down to brass tacks regarding them, but I did study on a question that was asked me. And the question is simply this: how do I know when I am being tempted or tested? So we are going to approach that. Actually, the question should be formed thusly: how do I know when I'm not being tempted or tested? And the reason is, all of life, especially in the Christian experience, is a test or a temptation. There's not a thing we do across the board that cannot provide for us a defeat in the Christian life, in a spiritual area. And we'll be explaining that. We have to know our stuff, because sometimes we think we're okay when we're not okay. I would just simply, to give an illustration of that, there are a whole lot of people that are unsaved who think they're okay, but they're not okay. And they're tempted to stay that way. There are a lot of people that are carnal. They're saved but haven't a clue about how to get right with God and the Christian way of life. And they're comfortable, they're secure in that. And they haven't a clue. They don't want to advance. They don't want to get better. And they're tempted to stay that way because that's what has come to be known as their comfort zone and the like. But the fact of the matter is, we must view life as a test. Every moment of every day, in every circumstance, even with other people, can pose a problem for you and for me regarding a test. So what we're going to do is look first at what is the real objective for us being here. The real objective is for us to be tested. Now, we're going to look in verse number 21 of Ephesians chapter 1. And you will recognize these as 5 of the 7 categories of angels: principalities, power, might, dominion, and name. Now, the highest rank is the anointed cherub. The lowest rank are the rank and file angels. And so it goes in pyramid fashion, from the most of the angels all the way up to the top. Now, out of this group, you have a third of them that are fallen. And out of this group, you have 2/3 that have forfeited their throne. There's not going to be any angels in eternity future to sit upon a throne. Now, we've studied that as part of the angelic conflict. Only angels sat upon the throne in eternity past, the dispensation of the beginning of times. In the dispensation of the fullness of times, only men are going to sit on these thrones. Now, that lets us know something, that we have to show 2/3 of the angels our competency to sit there. And that means we have to combat 1/3 of the angels along these various rankings to defeat them, to show these others that we deserve the throne that we get. Now, therefore, we're in a war and in a battle, but we're going to liken it actually to school, which in many cases in the public schools today is a war and a battle. Nancy Bryant came up and asked a question. She said, this may be a stupid question. And I said, no, it's not a stupid question. As she always says, I'm a school teacher, trust me. There are stupid questions. Yes, we understand. Anyway, we're going to liken this to a school. Now, we all know today that basically you enter in at kindergarten. There are preschool programs, and you're out at the 12th grade, hopefully. You can go on to advanced studies, but you have kindergarten through 12 there. Now, as you're going to school, the whole purpose is, 1, to learn things. 2, to be tested on what you know. So you go to school and you automatically are there for certain days and you cover chapter 1, test on Friday. You say, chapter 2, test on Friday, or however the system is. So you cover the material, but then you must show and demonstrate that you know the material by taking this test. So this goes on time and content. Now, if you are, say, let's just pick at random, a third grader, all right? And you just waste all of third grade, or a sixth grader, or a teenager, you're smart, and you waste that year. And you cannot reproduce on the test the content that has been covered in that period of time. Now, what should our school system, and we're not talking about social promotions, to be just and fair, what should that student have to do? Repeat the year. He should not be advanced until he learns the subject matter and can reproduce it fairly for a teacher in the test. Now, that's the very same thing for the Christian way of life. You enter in by getting saved. Now you have time and content, and then expect a test. To not expect the test means never to be promoted, never to be advanced, because God can only justly promote you as you demonstrate that you've learned it and that you can do it in your life. And that's how there's the parallel between the school system and our Christian life. Now, so expect to be tested. And that's the whole point of this study. When am I being tempted? The question really should be, when am I not being tempted? Because wherever you are, you have to know, am I spiritual or carnal? Am I thinking the truth to life, or am I not? Do I know the truth to think? And what about this person? They may be mad. Should I give them a piece of my mind? When is it right to spout off? When is it right to hold back? And that sort of thing. And so that's what we're going to discuss. 1 Thessalonians chapter 3 and verse number 5. So the very first point on this study is going to be, we have to understand there is a tempter. And you are not going to be excluded from a test. Eventually, he's going to get around to you. Or should I say, there's probably none of us here that have ever actually been tempted by the devil himself. He's got bigger fish to fry. However, because he has an organization that is in pyramid form with 1/3 of these, we have to go up this ladder, given time and content and test. And once we get the test and we pass it, we get the bigger guy on the next rung of the ladder. We've got to face him with that same type of concept, the material covered, content, and passing the test. And we do not get promoted until we pass the test. God will not give a social promotion. Well, he's been real sincere. Absolutely not. You must demonstrate it with the test. Now, here's, as well as several other places, where we get the idea of the tempter. Verse 5. Paul says, "For this cause, when I could no longer forbear." I like that. He couldn't stand it any longer. He just had to know. So see, Paul is not all that different from us. We want to know things, but this was bona fide. He wasn't just nebby or nosy. This is 1 Thessalonians 3:5. "I sent to know your faith." Now, there was a reason for this. He says, lest by some means the tempter. So here are the Thessalonian believers. They have trusted Christ. He has instructed them, and he wanted to know if they were continuing to learn and live what they knew, because he knew that the test would come through the tempter. by any means the tempter have tempted you, and our labor be in vain. In other words, you're saved, but you're not producing anything in the Christian way of life, and these dividends are not going to come filter down and funnel down the Apostle Paul. He wanted them not just to be saved, entry level. He wanted them to be successful, and that means to reach their maximum potential for righteousness in Christ. But he also knew that they had to be tested to do that, and that comes by way of the tempter. Now, if you'll note, it has the word "the." In the Greek, it's there. And the definite article is in the nominative masculine singular, which is going to specify, first of all, a name or a title. The actual name of this angel who is the tempter is Lucifer. But he also has some other titles. One of the titles that he has is the tempter. Note, it's masculine, it refers to him, it's singular. He is the head of all those that are part of this organized effort to tempt us, to tempt humanity. If you're unsaved, they tempt them to stay unsaved. If you're carnal, they tempt them to stay carnal. If you're spiritual, they tempt us to get carnal. You see, it's anything to keep us from fulfilling the will of God. So, when you have a definite article in the Greek, it also specifies identity. So we know immediately that we have somebody that is a tempter. Now, one more thing. It has to do with the word tempter itself. Pyrazone is the Greek word, and actually it's a substantive. When you have a substantive, you have something that is a noun and a verb together. It expresses something that is, and it also expresses something that he's doing. And a present active participle, nominative masculine singular. Now, I tell you these things because when you're looking at the tempter, that's what he is, and it's what he continually does. The present participle explains that. He is going to, he is never going to be your friend. He is never going to take you in. He is never going to aid and abet the enemy, and you are his enemy. He is always going to try to defeat you, and he is never going to take a prisoner and help you. He's going to leave you there bleeding and wounded to die. That's his job. He does not care about you. And that's what this means. He is the tempter. That's what he'll always be, and that's what he does. That's part of his program, because he knows if he doesn't get us to stay unsaved or to stay carnal, then he's going to lose. And it's a do or die situation in the angelic conflict. All right, so let's go back to Job. Point number 2. We're in Job chapter 1 and point 2. Not only is there a tempter which attacks us at the point of our faith, just like he did our brothers and sisters in Thessalonica. The word from which we get tempter is pyrazo in the Greek. Now that means to do something. And here's where the test comes in. To examine or analyze by testing. That's what the word means. If you're a tempter, you're going to demonstrate by putting something through the works to see what it's made of. And so that's what he's doing. If you are a tempter like Lucifer is, if you're a scientist, you show by demonstration this experiment. You know, if you add so much hydrogen, so much oxygen, it will make water. Now, it can be in a textbook, and that's well and good, but it has to be demonstrated as to actual fact. And so when it talks about your life and my life, it's well and good for God to say, okay, now here it is. But Lucifer says, oh no, that's not going to cut it. They have got to demonstrate it. in an open experiment, in an open testing, so that all can see whether they're true or false, whether they really got what you say or not. So here we are with Job, verse 7 of chapter 1. Now, this is the true story of Job. He is an illustration of one being tempted by the tempter. The Lord said to Job, verse 7, the Lord said to Satan, rather, "From whence comest thou?" Satan answered, "From going to and fro on the earth, walking up and down. Have you considered my servant Job? There's none like him." Now see, God is testifying of his servant, just like God testified of his son. All right? Lucifer will not settle for the testimony of God. I don't believe you, God. He can't do that. And so God says, all right, I'm going to allow you to put him to the test. And that's what Satan's job is as the tempter. It could even be better translated, the tester. The one who puts you through the test to see what you're made of, an actual demonstration of your substance and suitability for a throne or for a certain job in eternity future. So, verse 8. Have you considered my servant Job? There's none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feared God and eschewed evil. Boy, God himself is praising Job. Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for nothing? You're buying him, in other words. That's the only reason he's serving you. Let's see what he's really made of, or allow me to attack him, or tempt him, or put him through a test, and he'll curse you to the face. So verse 10, have you not made a hedge about him, his house, all that he has? Have you not blessed the work of his hands and his substance? Put forth your hand now and touch all that he has, and he'll curse you to the face. Now this is what the angelic conflict is all about. God allowing Lucifer to put believers through the test. And Jesus Christ was not exempt. His whole life was one of temptations. Some were more formal and official than others. But you see, he couldn't miss one little. He couldn't sin one iota. But God at least allows us some latitude and grace there. So, verse 12. The Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your power, only upon himself put not forth thine hand. And there are times in our lives when this must be true of us. Things that are important and valuable to us are going to be taken from us in the angelic. It's going to be a test. What will we do with it? How will we feel about it? How are we going to respond or react to this as far as God is concerned? I have a situation that I've told you about in the family where had one of a nephew to get married, and they have two kids in a house, and they got married, but on their honeymoon, took them to Hawaii. He took her to Hawaii. She was calling another guy already on the phone. Came back and started divorce proceedings right after the week they spent in Hawaii. Now, if it were me, I would be tempted to call a certain fellow in Chicago named Guido who talks like this and take out a marked contract on this person. But again, that's not me. In the circumstances, an extremely beautiful young woman, but foul-mouthed and has nothing to do with God, and try to talk and nothing. All of a sudden, is taken with a strange form of cancer at 22 years of age, reduced down to about 98 pounds, and is going to die very shortly. That's an incurable disease. And this same person who up until this point only took God's name in vain said, how could God do this to me? You know, just a vicious, nasty person with no standards, nothing whatsoever. And now all of a sudden being judged and taken into eternity. And the first things were, how could God do this to me? Well, now here is Job being put through a similar situation. Let's see how he responds. Verse number 13. And we'll not read all of this, but there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking. And the Sabaeans, verse 15, the Sabaeans fell upon them, took away, and slew the servants. And while we were speaking, there was another. The fire of God is falling. Verse 16, hath burned up the sheep and the servants. I alone am escaped. And it goes on down. He finally destroys everything that Job has except for a few servants and his nagging wife. And verse number 20, Job arose, rent his mantle, shaved his head. This is Middle Eastern signs of mourning and bereavement. Fell down upon the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked came out of my mother's womb, naked I'm going to return thither. The Lord gave, the Lord took away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. There was no bitterness. That doesn't mean he wasn't mourning and wasn't hurt and wasn't under distress and a whole lot of pressure. But Job understood what was going on here. And he was not, as says verse 22, in all this Job sinned not nor charged God foolishly. Why did you do that? I was comfortable down here. Now all of it's gone. And Job was successful. Now, very same thing was said in verse number 3 of chapter 2. Satan's back up there. The Lord said, have you considered my servant Job? There's none like him in the earth. And the last part is very important because here is what should be demonstrated. When he was put to the test, it said, still he holds fast his integrity. He was still spiritual. He didn't get carnal. He didn't have a royal hissy fit. Still he holds fast his integrity, although you move me against him to destroy him without a cause. There was no reason I should have done this, but in the angelic conflict, it wouldn't have been settled unless God allowed it. And God allowed the testing. And so the tempter came, and temptation can come in all forms and shapes and sizes. And this was the destruction of all that Job had per se. But now it says, verse 4, now he's going to get a little up close and personal, skin for skin. All that a man has will he give for his life. Okay, God, this didn't hurt him, but in the wallet and in his heart for his children. But now we're going to hurt him physically. Put forth thine hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, he'll curse thee to your face. So God said, he's yours, but save his life. And so Lucifer did the very same thing. And the last part, or verse 10 is what we want to read. He said to her, she said, curse God and die. You speak as one of the foolish women speak. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of God and shall not receive evil? So the good and the bad, rains on the just and unjust. In all this did not Job sin with his lips. So, number one is the fact there is a tempter. And number two, temptation is the rule, not the exception to the rule. Temptation is always going to come across the broad spectrum of life, and you have to be prepared. All right, come back with me to Matthew 4. Now, Lucifer is his name. The tempter is one of his main titles. That's what he does. But he tempts along two lines. And these two lines are given us by the other two titles that he has assumed, the devil and Satan. Now, verse number 1 of Matthew chapter 4. Now, remember that Jesus Christ is 30 years of age. He had just been baptized by John, filled with the Spirit, but he had to be tested. Adam's skull was more or less opened up, and God poured in a certain amount of knowledge. Jesus Christ had to learn it, and he learned it over the course of 30 years so that when he became old enough to be a federal head of the race, God the Father is going to allow his testing in two ways. These two ways are seen along the two lines of Satan's temptation. Verse number 1, or Lucifer's temptation. Then was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness for this express purpose, to be tempted of the devil. So, the devil is diabolos, and diabolos means to throw stones or accuse. In the book of Revelation, it says, the accuser of our brethren is cast down. Now, what does he accuse? He says to God about Job, you say one thing about him, but I say another thing. You say he's got the substance and suitability, and I say if I put him through the test, that he will not demonstrate either one of those characteristics. He doesn't know what to do, or if he knows what to do, he will not do it, and so therefore he is unsuitable for this. And you cannot keep on advancing him. This is my territory, my earth, and his prosperity and pleasure stops right here. So, but in this case, it was the Lord Jesus Christ. He was going to be tempted of one who was going to accuse him of not being able to do what he was supposed to, or that he would not do it. And thus you have the temptation. Now, turn back with me from this point to Mark chapter 1. And verse number 13. Now, this is the very same occasion, but I want you to see the change in the word or the title. And there, he was there in the wilderness 40 days, Jesus Christ, tempted of Satan. Now, was it the devil or was it Satan? Yes, it was both. As the devil, Satan was trying to accuse Jesus as he accused Job of not being worthy, not being suitable, not having what he needed. But as Satan, it's to keep him from advancing. Satan means an adversary or a personal opponent. So he tested him under both lights, to accuse him personally and also to stand in his way of advancement. Now, that's Satanas is the Greek word, and it's where Satan demonstrates his own superiority and worthiness over a foe or over an enemy. Now, remember, in the case of Jesus, Jesus Christ has the throne at the right hand of the Father. Satan's original charge was that Jesus Christ was incompetent. He didn't know what to do. He couldn't do it. He can't rule the universe. And so he begins as the devil to attack him. And he did so in his when Jesus assumed human form. But also he wants to prevent Jesus Christ from being promoted to the next grade and the next level so that Jesus will not be able to have that throne at the right hand of the Father. So he also attacks him as Satan, a direct personal opponent that stands as an obstacle of his way in advancement. All right. Now, let's go back to 1 Timothy. There are also a couple of other things we need to see here. 1 Timothy chapter 2 and verse number 14. Now, I've had some phone calls, people interested in the church. They've said, certain friends have told us about your church and so forth. Tell me about your church. And we'll tell some of the basic things. And, well, what's the objective there? And I said, well, we study the Bible. It's like we were talking there, Dan. That we have a session 1 and we study the Bible. Session 2, we do other things. We worship God and we're patriotic. We have church picnics, enjoy the fellowship. We sing and testify and all of those things. But when it comes down to it, we study the Bible. And they more or less said, well, We'll come and check you out and see, but we're interested in one of those worship churches. Now, worship churches emphasize experience and that sort of thing, and bypass real Bible in-depth study. But we believe that Paul tells us to study to show yourself approved. Now, The reason that we do this, and it comes right from Paul, is because along these lines of temptation, Satan has two other objectives. One, to prove us ignorant. We have the time, and God provided us with the content, but we didn't study it and we didn't learn it. And therefore, if you don't do that and there is a test, what can't you do? You can't demonstrate your knowledge. You don't know. You were thinking in class here when their teacher was teaching geography or history or biology or what have you. You were thinking about the football game or your sweetie about, you're going to talk with the girls afterwards. And everything went in one ear and out the other and over your head. And now all of a sudden Friday and chapter 1's test comes, and what can't you do? You can't put the material down. What do you try to do? Look at your neighbor's paper. At least I'll not say I tried to do that. There may have been a time in my life when I tried once or twice. Where am I? 1 Timothy 2. Verse number 14 of chapter 2, 1 Timothy. The woman being deceived was in the transgression. Now, that deception shows that she was in actuality, or she had in actuality, became ignorant of what God wanted. You remember the situation back there. What hath God said? Now, she had been in Bible class. The Lord had come down day after day and had taught them Bible doctrine, and mainly He inculcated, don't eat of that tree, don't eat of that tree, don't eat of that tree. She got a little confused, and somebody's asking me my opinion. Now, what really did God say? Oh, okay, and then she added to the Word of God and got a little bumfuzzled, and Satan said, God didn't say that, and she said, yes, that's absolutely right, God didn't say that. And she became, in effect, deceived and ignorant of what God had actually said. And when you become ignorant, if you don't know, you can't demonstrate. That's the whole problem. And when Satan put her to the test about eating of the tree, did she succeed or fail? She failed. Was she victorious or defeated? She was defeated because she was deceived. She was ignorant of what God said. Now, let's hold your place here and go back to Matthew chapter 4. Ignorance is something that we are all tested, that realm, in. Verse number 3, and the tempter came to him and said, have you had a six-pack of brewski? Do you want to snort this? He didn't say that. He said, if you're the Son of God, command these stones to be made bread. He had not eaten for 40 days. What did Jesus Christ do? It is written, man shall not live by bread alone. He demonstrated the knowledge of what to do in that circumstance. And in all of the testings of Jesus Christ, that's what He did. He quoted the verse to life, and then He lived it. He did what that verse said, and that's the important thing. It's not just to know, but the second aspect is, will you do what you know? Jesus said, this is what the Word says, but I'm going to do it anyway because I sure am hungry, and make me a Big Mac or what have you, and stop having these hunger pains. He did not do that. He knew what to do, and He in fact did it. And the temptation of Jesus Christ is an open, visible demonstration to God, the angels, Himself, and men. That's why it's recorded here, that He both knew what to do and would do it if called upon. So that's what temptation is about. It's actually knowing what God says about this part of life, and when you're put in that circumstance, to do it. All right? Let's go to 2 Corinthians. I have to watch my time here. 2 Corinthians chapter 2. And this is why there is such an emphasis here upon learning. You cannot live it unless you first learn it. Once you learn it, living it is not up to the pastor teacher. It's up to your own volition where you are. Okay. That's why the Apostle Paul says, lest Satan should get advantage of us. Now, what's he talking about? He's talking about the fact that Satan is the tempter, and he is looking for a weak link in the chain, a chink in your armor that he can penetrate. He is looking for some area where he can defeat you, attempt you, and defeat you. Show that you don't know it, or show that if you do know it, you won't do what God says. You'll be disobedient. That's why Paul says, lest Satan should get advantage of us. In order for us to defeat him, we must know some things. For we are not ignorant of his devices. And the word there has to do with his strategies, his methodologies, the way that he goes about things. And we're learning that today. He is the tempter. He'll always be. And he tempts through these two ways, Satan and the devil. And he'll tempt us in the area of ignorance and cognizance. Do we know what to do? And if we do, will we do it? So we know some of Satan's devices. Those are things that we need to understand, or else we'll be defeated always. All right? Let's come to Hebrews, still holding our place. So we'll come back here. Hebrews chapter 5. We'll start with verse number 12. Now, one of the things that Eve did, and this is something that we all are prone to do, is to go over the material and then to forget it. To go, we've been there and done that, but then we can't recall it. And that's what the author of Hebrews is referring to. Verse 11, he's talking about Melchizedek, Hebrews 5, of whom we have many things to say, but they're hard to be uttered, seeing you're dull of hearing. Well, why were they dull of hearing? For when for the time you ought to be teachers. And you know what a teacher is? A teacher is one who has come up through the ranks and has been promoted, has touched every base, has achieved every level, has been legitimately given an advancement up to the top, where now he or she presumably knows more than the students, though you can't tell the students that they have been there and done that, and that they definitely know more, at least they should. That's his point. You've had the time, you've had the content, you seem to have learned it. Here we are, you should have been teachers. People should be looking up to you by way of knowledge and example in this, but ye have need that one teach you again, which be the first principle. You got to go back to kindergarten, first grade, ABCs, the oracles of God, and become as such of need of milk and not strong meat. That's why it is important that we learn the concept and we stay at it. For everyone that uses milk is unskillful in the word of righteousness, for he is a babe. The strong meat belongs to them that are of full age. In other words, they went through the time, and by reason of use, they learned it and are using it in their life, have their senses exercised to discern both good and evil. They're tempted, but no biggie. Just like Jesus, here's what the Scripture says, here's what I'm going to do. And that's the concept, that the Word of God is a lamp unto our feet and a light unto our path. We don't trip and fall if we know it. All right, so let's come back and get point 2 here. I used to be a school teacher in the South, and you had to talk like that. Yeah. Listen, yeah. They seem to understand that. Verse number 14. Adam was not deceived, says part A. The woman was, though she knew, she became ignorant, practical ignorance. Adam was not deceived. He understood. He knew the lesson. But what was it? Well, that's the second part. Satan tempts along these lines. Do you know it? And if you do know it, will you do it? So, there's ignorance and there's cognizance. Now, we need to understand that. There are certain things that are commanded and mandated for us, certain things we need to obey God on, and that's put before us. Will we conform to God's will for our lives as specified in the Word? All right, now let's come back. And let's just look at a few verses here. John chapter 13. These are transdispensational principles regarding knowing and doing. Verse 17. Jesus said, if ye know these things, all right, first part taken care of, they did. Happy are ye if ye do them. True joy, happiness, victory comes as a result of doing what you know. Chapter 15, verse 14. Ye are my friends, says the Lord, if ye do whatsoever I command you. So the doing part of it is important, and it's a Pauline concept as well. Stay with me, just have a few more seconds. James chapter 4, and then Psalms, and we're done with part 1. James 4. James 4, verse number 17. And even though we have quoted kingdom things, as I say, these pertain to all dispensations. As a matter of fact, in quoting Schofield, dispensationalism is where man is tested with regard to a specific revelation of God. Dispensationalism itself understands the concept of testing. God will reveal it, will man believe it, and do it, act upon it. Verse number 17. Therefore, to him that knows to do good, but he does it not. See, that's Adam's case. Eve didn't know it. He did know it, and he did it anyway. Therefore, to him that knoweth to do good and doeth it not, to him it is sin. She sinned in ignorance, he sinned in cognizance. Both came as a result of the tempter tempting them along these areas, proving them both unfit and unworthy and unsuitable to be the leaders of this world. Psalms 119, and this is the last. Psalms 119. Quickly, we'll read down through, starting with verse 1. Blessed are the undefiled in the way, because they walk in the law of the Lord. Blessed are they that keep his testimonies, they that seek him with the whole heart, they that do no iniquities, because they walk in his ways. You see, they know it, and they do it. You've commanded us to keep your precepts diligently. Oh, that my ways were directed to keep your statutes. See, that's the part of the temptation. Here's what God said, but we're tempted to veer off to the left and to the right, as was the first generation in Israel, Exodus generation. Then shall I not be ashamed when I have respect unto all your commandments. It is throughout the Christian life being promoted and advanced, time, content, test, advancement. Now, it's time, content, test, and advanced material, and advancement. And up we go, and up we go, and up we go. So that's what it says. I'm not going to be ashamed when I become the teacher rather than the kindergarten student. Then shall I not be ashamed when I have respect to all your commandments.